Hello everyone, welcome to our very first live stream. This is our Podcast.co AMA. We're joined here with myself, Daryl, and Laura.
Hello.
So Laura is our customer success manager and I am the marketing manager here at Podcast.co. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to go through a quick demo of the Podcast.co platform, how everything works. Laura's going to take care of that one for you. And then we're just going to answer some of the questions that you've been asking us.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess we will start with a little tour of Podcast.co. So what I've done is I've got an example account set up and ready to go. So I'm going to take you on a quick whiz-stop tour of everything. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave them in the comments. We'll get to a few of those afterwards. So hopefully I can have my screen on the stream. There we go. That should be showing for everybody now, hopefully. So this is just an example podcast I've got set up. It's not public, so if you do see some pretty upsetting stats on here, that's the reason why. So we'll start off with this little home screen here. Every podcast has its own little home screen, and this just gives you a rough overview of what's going on with your podcast at a glance. So right off the bat, you can see how many episodes you've got live, how many total monthly downloads you've got, and how many unique monthly downloads you've got. I'll explain the difference between those two in a sec. And we also recently added this estimated subscribers graph as well. So you can track how many subscribers about your podcast has. The reason that has to be an estimate is just because there's so many different podcasting apps out there with new ones being created every single day. It's kind of impossible to keep track of an accurate number of how many subscribers your podcast has. So this just takes your unique downloads from across X amount of months and produces a logical guess based on of that. As for the difference between the monthly total downloads and the monthly unique downloads, monthly total is every single download your podcast has had over the last 30 days in this instance. And unique is every IP address that's looked at your podcast. So for example, if I was to download an episode of this podcast 4 times in a row, big fan, monthly would show that as 4 downloads, but unique would show that as 1 because I'm one person. So hopefully that clears that one up. And you also get a little bit of a checklist down the bottom here as well that just shows you a couple of ideas on what you should be doing to get your podcast started and up and running. That will disappear once you've ticked everything off and you're all good to go. So the next tab along on this little top menu here is episodes. So this is probably the section you'll be spending a lot of your time in when you're up and running on Podcast.co. And it's pretty self-explanatory. This is where your episodes live. So as you can see here, it's split into 3 different sections. Published is all of your episodes that are live. Your listeners will be able to see these on places like Apple and Spotify, and they'll be able to listen to them and enjoy those. Scheduled is all of your episodes that you have uploaded and then scheduled to automatically publish at a later date and time. So that's pretty good for if you want to record, say, 10 episodes in bulk and then schedule them out over a period of a month or 2, just to give yourself a bit of buffering room to go away and create some more content for your podcast in the meantime. And unlisted is sort of like a drafts box. So anything that's in here is not visible publicly, and the only way people can listen to anything in this section is if they have the direct link to the episode that's in here. So we've seen people use this for a couple of different reasons. Usually it's people that do interviews and they might need the person to approve the content before it goes out. So they'll stick it in here, send the link to the client, they can check it over and make sure it's all right, and they haven't said anything that they don't want to. And then as soon as they give it the okay, you can move it straight into unlisted, into scheduled or published, sorry. Couple of extra bits in this section as well. You've got a couple of extra buttons on the end here. So share episode just gives you a couple of different ways of sharing your episode out. So in here you have things like the embeddable player. This is just for this one episode. We do have an embeddable player for the entire podcast that I'll show you in a few minutes. But if you just want the one podcast episode player, say on a blog style site, for example, at the top of your blog post, That's what you can use right there. Page, I will show you this in a bit more detail a little bit later on, but this is essentially just a direct link to that episode. So if you want to share your episode out on Twitter, for example, and you need a link to your episode, you can use that. Just click copy link and then paste it into your tweet. And also the audiogram feature lives in here. Now I won't be able to go over this in a lot of detail on this demo today, because it does take a little bit of time to go through all of that. We only have limited time tonight. But if anybody does want to have a closer look at that, we do have an article on our website all about the headliner feature. And also in our help center, we have a video and a guide. The video is also probably on the YouTube channel, so you'll probably be able to find it in there as well. You also have a button for the episode specific analytics. So these are the analytics for that one episode. We do have ones for the entire podcast that I'll show you in just a little bit, but this is just for this one episode. Like I said, this podcast is not public, so I'm just trying to find one that does actually have statistics going on at the moment, so I can show you that in a little bit more detail. I'm pretty sure this one had some. There we go. So you have a graph up the top here that shows you your total and unique downloads for any date during the period of time you've got selected. And you can change that period of time up the top here. There's a couple of different presets at the top, or you can select a custom range like I was doing before by clicking a start and end date on the calendar, and that will adjust in the background for you. And you have two graphs down the bottom that show you where your listeners are coming from in the world and what they're using to listen to your podcast. And you can hover over these sections as well, and it will give you an actual number and percentage. We are planning on adding in an option to download a copy of your statistics as well. So that will be on the way. So you'll be able to download a backup copy of your statistics, so you don't have to keep coming back into here to check on it. And then on the end here, you have these three little dots, and that's just a few miscellaneous options. So edit lies in here. So if you need to edit the title, description, any of that, you can do all of that in here. And essentially that's just gonna change it on here, and then that will roll out to places like Apple and Spotify over a period of 24 hours, usually. Replace media is exactly what it sounds like. If you accidentally upload the wrong audio file, you can come in here and select the correct file, and then apply that to the episode. And again, that will roll out to places like Apple and Spotify over a period of 24 to 48 hours. Move to unlisted, again, exactly what it sounds like. That'll just scoot it straight into the unlisted section and take it out of the public eye for you. The transcription feature also lives in here. Again, I can't show that in a lot of detail today because we do have limited time. But if anybody is interested in the transcription feature and seeing what that can do, I believe we have an article on that as well in the blog. And we also do have a help guide on that one as well. So you'll be able to find it in those two places. And download is just if you need to download a backup of the MP3 that you uploaded, you can click that and it will download, so you can make backups of your MP3s if needs be. In terms of uploading an episode, we take MP3 files only. We did used to take M4A files as well, and then we found out that Spotify actually does not accept M4A files. It doesn't like them. So to save everybody some time, we do only accept MP3 files at the moment. And all you need to do is click and drag a file into this window and it will start uploading. Or you click this upload episode button here, that will open up your file finder, and then you can find the file you want to upload that way instead. So just moving along to the analytics tab. This is kind of the same as what I showed you guys before with the episode analytics, but this time it's just for the entire podcast as a whole. So you've got the same graph up the top showing your total and unique downloads for the period you've got selected. Again, you can change the time range up the top here using one of the presets or by clicking a start and end date on the calendar, and everything adjusts. You have the same graphs down the bottom showing where in the world your listeners are coming from and what they're using to listen to your podcast. But you also get an extra graph on the left that just shows you your top 5 most popular episodes during the period you have selected. So that's pretty good for gauging what content's been popular with your audience. So you might bring certain topics back or certain people back, depending on what your audience is into. Onto the settings area. So this is, again, relatively straightforward. If you need to change anything to do with the main part of your podcast, you can do that in here. So for example, if you needed to update the artwork at all, or maybe you made a typo in the description or something, you can adjust all of that in here. And again, any changes made in here will roll out to Apple, Spotify, etc. Over a period of 24 to 48 hours usually. And in advanced, this is actually the section that we recommend once you've got your podcast set up initially. You come straight to this section and then set this up next before you even think about putting an episode in, just because there are a couple of things in this section that are pretty important. So the important ones mainly being the time zone here. If that's not set to your time zone correctly, the scheduling will be off. I did make the mistake of leaving that on an American time zone once and tried to publish an episode out at, I think, 8 a.m. UK time, and it went out at some time in the afternoon instead or something. So it's well worth making sure that one's in check. And then also making sure you have an author name in this field. Author email doesn't matter so much. But if there's no author name in this field, Apple Podcasts in particular will spit you back out until that field's filled in. So worth just double checking and making sure that that's all set up the way you want it to be. And these content settings at the bottom here are also very important because this is what tells the directories how to display your podcast. So whether your podcast is episode by episode or in seasons, what language the podcast is in, and whether the podcast is clean or explicit in nature. If you think you're only going to have a couple of episodes here and there that have swear words in, you can leave this as clean and just mark those individual episodes as explicit. If you think it's going to be majority of episodes, I would mark the entire podcast as explicit just to be safe. And on our business plan, we do actually offer the option to remove the Podcast.co branding from our embeddable players and the podcast page, which I'll be showing you in just a minute. So that's just this little switch here. You can turn that off and that completely wipes the Podcast.co logos and stuff from the players and the page. And then the last section in here is the share and publish section. So this is the one that a lot of people get excited about and have the most questions about, so I'll do my best. So in this first bit, you have your RSS feed. You can just click copy there and paste it wherever you might need it. So you've always got access to that. And you also have our distribution service. Now, when you first come in here, this will have two different buttons at the bottom. One will say, I prefer to manage this myself, and the other one will just say, distribute my podcast. If you click, I prefer to manage this myself, it will essentially give you access to a bunch of different boxes down here. So you can type in the links to your podcast once you get them back from different directories, like Apple Podcasts, for example. So you can connect those up. And you'll also get access to our help guides on how to submit to those different platforms as well. If you decide that you want us to distribute your podcast for you, which by the way is included in all of the plans that we offer, you just click distribute my podcast and that will send a request off to our submissions team. This little orange text will appear saying submissions pending. Once our submissions team pick up your request, which is usually within 24 hours, not including weekends, obviously, that will change to we're working on it. You'll get an email saying that they've picked it up and they've started working on it. And you'll be able to come in here. All of these icons will start grayed out like these ones here. And as they get approved, you'll see them up in color and you'll be able to change. You'll be able to come in here and copy the link to your podcast on that platform, or open up your podcast on that platform to have a look at it and make sure it's all right. That whole process from start to finish usually takes around about 7 days max. We have seen slightly shorter times, particularly with Apple at the moment, but we say 7 days just to be on the safe side. The main culprits that take the longest are Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts out of those, just because their submissions processes are a little bit different. The rest of them are usually live within 24 to 48 hours of the initial submission. And also, I should mention, once this is done, it's done. Any new episodes that you upload after your podcast is approved on all these platforms will be live within 24 hours of them being published on Podcast.co. So you're not going to have to wait a week every single time you put an episode up. Also in here, we have the embeddable player. So this is the other player that has the entire podcast on it this time. So you've got the embed code up the top here. You can just click copy there and paste it onto your site where you want it to sit. Looks a little something like this. You can choose between a dark and a light theme for the player. You can change the buttons from squared to rounded off, personal preference. And you can change the color of any of the buttons on the player as well. So if you've got a branded color, for example, you can just type it in there and it'll change accordingly. And you can also turn downloads, sharing, and subscriptions on or off, depending on what you want people to be able to do using the player. Most people just leave all three of those options on. The podcast page is a basic sort of web page that we provide for your podcast. So it's sort of like a basic landing page, basically. And I'll show you what that looks like. So this one is very roughly set up, but you'll be able to see what it all does. So you have a banner image at the back here. It defaults to these waves and a color of your preference, but you can choose a custom image to sit in the back there. We've got all the size guidelines on the help center for all of these different images. The text title you can turn off if you have the title of your podcast on your image. For example, you might not want the text overlay there as well, so you can turn it off in the customization options. The subscribe button, when you've got that connected up to different directories like Apple, Spotify, etc., that will unroll to show all of those. Share podcast gives your listeners a few different ways of sharing the podcast with their friends. So we've got Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, email, and also the link to the page down here, just in case we've missed any that they would like to share with their friends. You can connect up some social media icons on the right here. So you've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and I'm pretty sure we added LinkedIn to that recently as well. And you can connect up some donation buttons over here as well. So if you'd like to accept donations for your podcast, you can connect up Patreon and PayPal over there. You get the description of your podcast on the left here and a list of the episodes. And if someone clicks on an episode they want to listen to, they get the description of the episode down here. They get a play and download option if you've allowed downloads. This one doesn't have downloads turned on, so that option's missing here. And also they get encouraged to keep listening to the podcast by getting shown the next episode along in the list as well, because everybody wants those downloads. And going back to this, the final thing we have in here is the subscribe button. So this was kind of born out of basically a lot of people telling us that they had buttons all over their website for subscribe to all these different options, and it looked a bit of a mess. So we made one button that kind of does all of it in one. I am actually just going to switch to a live podcast just to show this one off a little bit better. There we go. So essentially it looks like this, just the white, not the orange background. That's just to make it show up. You can choose between a dark and a light theme for the button and change the color of the word subscribe to whatever you'd like. And then you can choose up to 5 directories that you want to be on display. And when people come to this button on your website and they want to subscribe to your podcast, they hover over it and they get all those different options. So they can click through and subscribe on whichever platform is the most relevant for them. And it just makes everything a little bit neater. If you're going for one of the pro or business platforms and you're planning on having multiple podcasts on your account, just to give you an idea of what that would look like, when you first log in, you'll have something like this. So you're able to see all of the podcasts on your account, and you're able to click through and go through to the one that you want to have a look at and manage pretty easily. If you have clients on this account as well, I should mention, you can make it so that they only have access to certain podcasts. So when they come into this account, they'll only be able to see the one podcast, and they won't be able to see all the podcasts on your network. And that was a very brief rundown of everything that Podcast.co platform has to offer. So Daryl, I don't know if you want to take back over now.
Cool. Yeah. So should we just go straight into some of these more technical questions based on the platform first?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'll just read out some of the questions we've got here. So how long does distribution take? You did briefly go over that, didn't you? It depends on the plan.
Yeah, so it can take, we say up to 7 days just to be safe, but it's mainly Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts that do take the longest. So Apple, we say, can take up to 7 days. We've been seeing recently about 5, but we've seen 7, so we just say 7 to be safe. And Google Podcasts, they sort of pick up your podcast whenever they manage to read the public feed. And usually that process only takes about 3 to 4 days. But again, we have seen a week, so we just say a week to be safe.
Cool. Okay. Cool. Okay. What platforms do you distribute to? Do you go to iHeartRadio?
We do. So the ones that we distribute to, if I just get the list up for my my own reference, make sure I get them all. So we do Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Acast, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Stitcher, Deezer, and we do iHeart by request. The reason we do iHeart by request only is just because their submission process can take up to 2 weeks, so it's a very long process. So we like to be able to keep an eye on it individually per podcast, so we can make sure that it goes through okay. But those are all the ones that we distribute to. And then obviously platforms like Overcast and Castro, for example, those are examples of platforms that read their data from Apple Podcasts. So if your podcast is on Apple Podcasts, you'll be on those platforms automatically, basically.
Cool. We've got another question based on platforms here as well. Do you plan on doing business with SoundCloud? SoundCloud is a bit of a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, so SoundCloud is another example of a hosting platform. So we won't be linking up with them to do distribution because they don't have a way of doing that without having your audio hosted with them. If they ever put something like that forward, then we will consider it. But at the moment, no, we don't.
Okay. I host a podcast with my friends. Can my friends sign up and have access to the podcast?
Yes, so if you're on the Pro or the Business plan, you get multiple logins for the account. So you can go into your account and you can add them to the account via email. They'll get an invite, so they just click accept on that invite. And then they'll have access to the account. Of course, like I mentioned, you can then limit their access. So if you only want them to have access to one podcast on your account and not everyone else's, you can go in and limit their access in there as well.
Yeah, so the Pro plan comes with up to 20 shows and 20 different users. But if you need more than that, then we have the Business plan, which is unlimited amount of shows and 50 users. So you can have up to 50 people on your plan at one time, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. So I represent a number of podcasts. Is there a hierarchy where individual users can access their podcast, but not mess around with other podcasts on the network? So just cover that enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did just kind of answer that, but just go over it real quick. Yeah. So the account owner will obviously have access to all the podcasts on the account, and then you're sort of the one that distributes the access to other people that are on the account. So there's 2 different roles I should mention as well within a podcast. So if you have say like a couple of people that are working on one podcast in the account, you can set someone up so they're the podcast manager. They'll be able to see all those tabs I just took you through in a normal account. But there's also a content creator role, which is a more limited role. So all a content creator will be able to do is see the episodes tab and upload episodes or move episodes around. They won't be able to see things like statistics or the main settings of the podcast, for example.
Cool. Okay, so just looking for more other plan-based ones. So we have, how much is the podcast transcription plan?
The transcription?
Yeah. That's
Okey-doke.
actually included on all our plans as standard.
Yes, yeah. So the audiogram feature and the transcription feature comes with all of our paid plans as standard. Yeah.
Okay. And then what are the plans specifically? So we kind of gone over that. So the starter plan, you get one show, unlimited amount of episodes, one user. You can have up to 2 hours of transcriptions per month, and an unlimited amount of audiograms created per month. But there is a limit of 10,000 monthly downloads. And how has that worked out, Laura?
So it's exactly what it sounds like. So the 10,000 monthly downloads is the allowance that you have. I believe that's total downloads. So you'd be keeping track of that in the statistics section that I showed you guys. And that resets every single month. So you're not limited to 10,000 forever. It resets every single month.
And then the Pro plan, which is the middle plan we have, is up to 20 shows. Again, unlimited episodes, 50,000 downloads, 20 users, and then you get up to 5 hours of transcriptions per month. And then the top plan we have is the business plan, where you get unlimited shows, 100,000 downloads, 50 users, and 10 hours of transcriptions per month. So we just got a question based on that one. Do downloads include streams?
Yes, so we get this one quite a lot. In podcasting terms, everything is a download. With the reason it's counted like that is because someone may very well just be playing the episode and not actively downloading it to their device. But for the most part, when you listen to a podcast on an app, it does usually download the episode in the background so you can continue listening. If you start listening in your house and then you have to run out the door to work, you're still going to be able to listen to it on the train into work. So yeah, everything's counted as a download. So yes, streams would be included in that.
Okay, so we'll just move on to some of the more marketing-based questions now.
Sure.
So we have this one. I have a question about merchandising. Is it a good idea for brand awareness, financial return, or not worth the headache? So it depends entirely on your podcast and your fan base, I assume. There is because we have the Patreon integration, you can just add that to your podcast page, and then with Patreon you can have different tiers of it. So when people would pay you a certain amount each month, and then they get rewards based on that. So you can work out that way and give them a t-shirt or something based on your podcast, based on what tier they're on their Patreon. But if you wanted to go about creating your own merchandise specifically and creating a separate merch store, that's going to be a bit of a headache, especially when you're starting out. But then there are third-party companies you can go to where they can print shirts for you, and then they just take a bit of the money from it. So that's probably the best way to go around it if you were that invested in creating merchandise for your podcast. What kind of podcasts do the best? That's kind of a hard question to answer, really, because it all depends. There's so many different types of podcasts, and they all do really, really well. You've got comedy ones, news ones, music-based podcasts, podcasts. It all depends on what kind of niche you want to get into.
Yeah, I think that also kind of depends on how you define doing well. Because, there's niche podcasts out there that do have smaller audience numbers, perhaps, but they have a more loyal audience that will sing their praises from the high heavens. So I guess that sort of depends on how you define success. Because you can have a real niche podcast with a really loyal audience, but you can also have a podcast that has a mass audience that still are pretty loyal, but they're a mass audience, so they're from all different walks of life. So yeah, I think that depends, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as long as you're doing a podcast that's something that you really truly care about and are passionate about, then you're going to be successful in your own way.
Yes.
Just do whatever works best for you, I assume. We've got another technical one here. How do we request to have our podcast transcribed, and how long does it take after a podcast is uploaded?
Okay, so the transcription feature is built in, so you don't have to send off a request or anything. You literally just go to the episodes tab, then there's the 3 dots at the end that I showed you. and that drops down, and there's a transcription feature in there. So you just select the language of the main speaker. English does have a couple of different accent options as well, so you're not just stuck with generic English. And then once that's set running, for an average length podcast episodes, are around 20 to 30 minutes. Usually the transcription feature will take between probably like 10 to 15 minutes. So feel free to like go grab a cup of tea while it's generating or something. And then when you come back, you just click on exactly the same place and it should be there for you. As for how long it takes after an episode is uploaded, you can do it straight away as soon as the episode's gone through processing and it's on there.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, it's that easy. You just click a button, wait for it, and then you get a notification when it's all done.
Exactly.
Okay. Here we go. I have a question about the best way to get listeners to a new podcast. So one of the best ways to do that is probably just by simply just creating social channels for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we recommend. It's what we've done with some of our other platforms as well. Just create a Twitter, an Instagram, even a Facebook page, and then just start interacting with people who are relevant to what your podcast is about.
Mm-hmm.
Tweet them directly, just ask them to give you a listen, maybe give you a review. That's one great way. It's so easy to do it as well.
Yeah.
And then there is also cross promotion, which is another really, really easy way to do it. So what you do there is you find another podcast that's relevant to what yours is, and then you reach out to them and ask to be on their podcast as a guest. And then you have them on your podcast as a guest and you promote each other that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a very, very easy way for you to do that now, because we have launched Matchmaker FM, which is a free-to-use platform. So you can upload your podcast to Matchmaker and then find guests through there. Or you can upload yourself as a guest on Matchmaker and find podcasts through there. So it's very easy to do. We will drop a link to Matchmaker FM in the chat now. I believe Graham will be able to do that for you. But yeah, it's just incredibly easy. You just join it, start messaging people based on what you are interested in. I will see if I can set up an impromptu screencast now of the page. Gonna technical burst on the spot here. Oh, there we go. He was on it. So this is the Matchmaker homepage. So as soon as you log in, you can see here the latest shows that have just joined and the latest guests that have joined. And say I'm a podcaster and I want to find a new show to appear on. And I have a podcast about food because I really like food. I want to speak to someone based in the United Kingdom because it's going to be easier time zone based for me. I just filter by country there. And again, by language. And then I only want people who are available. So I will click hide unavailable profiles and apply. And here we go. So these are all the English United Kingdom based food podcasts that we have on Matchmaker at the moment. Oh, there's not going to be that one. I'll find one that's more popular. Let's go business.
Business is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a few here that I could be a guest on if I just simply reach out to them. Quite a few pages worth as well here, which is good. So then let's just say I want to appear on Matched. Oh, I can't because I'm the manager of that podcast. My mistake. Okay, I want to be on the Homework podcast. So I just click here, contact show. And then I send them a message saying what my podcast is about, what I can offer them as a guest on their podcast, and send the message. It's that simple. And if I want a guest for my podcast, it's exactly the same here. So I can search here, or you can search keyword. So let's go. What's a good keyword for a podcast, Laura?
Oh gosh, marketing. There you go.
And here are all the marketing-based guests that we have on Matchmaker. Oh, look at that one.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it's that easy. You just do it like that. And then you can check your messages here as well. So you can see it is quite active. We have quite a few people messaging in already. Mm-hmm. And it is completely free to join. And that is a brief overview of Matchmaker. So yeah, really easy, completely free. and you will get loads of brilliant guests. Okay, what is our next question? Let me have a look. So how can I increase my total plays and listeners? So again, it's kind of a similar question there. You just really want to be marketing yourself as well as you can. Make sure you are distributed to all the relevant platforms, which obviously we will do for you. And yeah, just get your voice out there as much as you can in front of as many podcasters as you can, and then cross promote. What would you recommend the best podcast setup for beginners? So beginners probably just want to start off with a very, very simple setup. So we just recommend a simple USB microphone. That's all you really need at the moment. If you just start out listening. And yeah, free software. So you can use, is it Audition or Audacity? I get those two mixed up every time. Yeah, that's completely free to use. It's just a very basic editing software. You just plug your microphone straight into your Mac. It'll pick it up as the microphone, press record, and you're off.
Yep.
But obviously with the current situation, finding guests to record with you in person is a bit difficult. So you might need to do it via Zoom or Skype or anything like that if you're a guest on your podcast.
For better audio quality, if you can manage without video as well, I would also recommend either Zencaster or Clean Feed for remote interviews as well, just because they give you a bit better audio quality because you don't have the video element there. So it depends on whether you can do without the video or not. Yeah.
We've got another question here. So on the plans, can I change the name of the podcast if I want to, or do I need to have another podcast and upgrade?
No, so you can change the name of the podcast at any point. And that will roll out to the different directories over a period of time. Title changes might take a little bit longer just because it is quite a major change to the directory listing. And also you might have to bear in mind that links might not change. You might need to contact the directories to get the link to your podcast changed, because that might still contain the old title if they're only changing the one on the listing. If you wanted to have another podcast on your account and you're on the starter plan, then yes, you would need to upgrade to the next plan up, which is the Pro plan. That allows up to 20 podcasts on your account, so you're not going to run out of room for a little while there. And yeah, I think that addressed both points in that question.
Yeah, I think so. To see if we have any more here. What are your favourite podcasts?
Ooh. Anyone that's been around Podcast.co for a while probably already knows mine, because I believe I have 2 articles and a video about it. But mine is Welcome to Night Vale. So there you go. That's mine.
Okay. I think mine is My Dad Wrote Porno. I was hoping to go see it this year, but it's going to happen now.
Gutted.
I know. Do we have any more? Graham's not sending any more questions over. I think that's it for questions. I'll just wait a minute, see if anyone has any final ones for us based on anything that we've mentioned.
In the meantime, I do like that bandana, Daryl.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See if we've got any on there on the form. Otherwise, I think I might be able to just round it off.
Can you put music in your podcast? There we go. You can, but we wouldn't recommend putting copyright music in your podcast. Pure reason being, there basically isn't a licensing option out there for podcasts yet. There's probably licensing companies that are working towards a solution, but it's not there yet. And we have seen a number of podcasts be taken down from particularly Spotify. They've been pretty on it recently for having copyright music in their podcast. So if you do want to use music in your podcast, that's completely fine, but you will need to find some royalty-free music, copyright-free music. We do actually have an album that's free to download on the Podcast.co website. I believe the URL for that is podcast.co/music.
Yeah.
And that is an entire album, and I believe there's a second one on the way somewhere along the line when we can find the time to finish that one off. But that one is on the way as well. As for where you can find Jingles or royalty-free music, like I said, podcast.co/music for the music. And then Jingles, you can use sites like, what's it called? The Free Music Archive. That has a lot of stuff on it. And also you can use stuff from the YouTube audio library as well. With those two options, though, you do just have to be careful of the Creative Commons licensing on it, though, as some of them will require like attribution and stuff like that. So just be double check on those, and just be careful on those ones.
And again, Jingles, we do have a few of those available on our website as well.
Oh, we do. Pardon me. Thank you, Darren.
What is a good length for a podcast?
We usually kind of recommend between 20 to 40 minutes, and I'd say 40 minutes is sort of the very top end of where you want to be aiming, really. After that amount of time, usually you see more drop-offs and the audience attention span wane. I know mine certainly does after 40 minutes. So you tend to find that people start dropping off after that point. So 40 minutes is probably the top end of what we'd say for that one.
And again, when you're just starting off, you probably want to start off shorter.
Yeah.
So they're just new listeners. And then if your content is incredible and they keep on asking for more and more and more, then you can easily just push the hour limit, and people will still be happy about it because it's what they want to hear. So you're best off just testing the waters, starting off shorter, and do things that way.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
And we've got one on the chat here. Can you critique our podcast? It depends what the podcast is about. I mean, if it's something I'm interested in, then critiquing it would be quite easy. But
do you know what?
It depends on the content, really. I could critique it from a technical point of view, but probably not a content point of view.
There we go.
Okay, I think that is it for questions. So if there's nothing else, we're going to wrap this one up now. So thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you found this helpful and useful. I did.
You learn something every day.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining us. If you do have any more questions, then drop us an email at hello@podcast.co or on our social media, which is at podcast.co. Or if you're a Matchmaker question, then it is at We Are Matchmaker. We'll drop links to those in the chat here for you, so it's a bit easier. But yeah, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, bye guys.
Hey, before you go anywhere, I have a quick question for you. Do you have a podcast? And if you do you want to book more interesting, high-profile guests on your show? Well, if you answered yes to either of these questions, I'd love to invite you to come and join our community over at Matchmaker.fm. Matchmaker is a service that connects awesome podcasts just like yours with incredible and high-profile guests that make for really interesting conversations. It's really straightforward to get started and completely free to sign up. Just connect using your LinkedIn, Facebook or Google account, and then you can begin connecting with guests based on their area of expertise, location, and much more. If you haven't checked it out already, go to matchmaker.fm, get started. It's just like Tinder, but for podcasters.